We're going to model the Apple Watch Ultra 3 today in Blender from scratch. Now I'm going to try and explain everything as much as I can so you can follow along even if you're a beginner. But if you need some more explanations for the tools and techniques which you're going to see me use in this video, I explained everything in depth in my Blender Masterclass course. There's a link for that in the description, so go check it out. Now let's quit wasting time, let's start the video. Okay, so step number one, we gotta get some reference images. And I found some pretty good pictures on this Danish website called elgiganten.dk. So just go to elgiganten.dk, you can see it right up here at the top, and then search for Apple Watch Ultra 3. And you're gonna find a bunch of variations of this watch, so just pick whichever one you like. I'm gonna go with this one right here. And this is where we're gonna download some reference images. So if you click on the third picture in this case, we can see we got a pretty good front view picture, and we also got a nice side view reference image. Now, for whatever reason, if you click on this image and if you just save it onto your computer, it's going to be saved as some sort of file which Blender can't open. Now what you want to do is click on this image and go to right click, save image as, and I recommend you make a new folder just for this project. This is where you're going to store all your reference images, you're going to render your images. So I named mine Apple Watch. You're going to open up that folder and you're going to make sure you save it as the right type, because right now it's AVIF, whatever the fuck that means, but Blender can't load that shit. So we have to change the type to all files, and then we have to change the name to .png at the end, and then when you save this to your computer, Blender is going to be able to open it. So now if you go to Blender, you want to go to front view and you're going to go shift A, image reference, find the folder where you saved your picture, find the picture, add it into your scene. It completely fucked us because now it's just a pink image, so that didn't work. Alternatively, you can just open up this image in an image editing program. I'm using PaintNet. You can use Photoshop, you can go online, you can use something like Canva for free, and then you want to save this image to your computer and then save it as a PNG file. Then it's going to work. Now I'm also going to crop this image out because I don't want to look at this shit, so I'm going to select this part, copy that into a new image. And by the way, you might also want to invert your colors. If this background is too bright, it's going to hurt your fucking eyes as you're modeling. But anyway, save this to your computer and then you can save this as front. Make sure you save it as a PNG, and then we're also going to take the other one, we're going to save that separately. This one's going to be side, and now we should be able to go front view, shift A, image reference, open up your first image. That's going to be our side image, so we're going to look at this one from the side, and then we're going to go to top view, and in top view we're going to go image reference, open up the top view image. So we're going to lower that down. I'm also going to check opacity so I can see through it, so I can see the lines in my background when I'm in orthographic projection. And then the other thing you probably want to do is get a couple of images of this object like this so you can see all the details. Now you might want to just open this up on your phone, but if you want to look at it on your computer screen, you can go to Google and just type in PureRef. It's going to take you to this little free program which allows you to look at reference images as you go. Scroll down to the bottom. You probably don't want to donate nothing, so just type in $1 and then you can download this for free, and that's going to give you this little black canvas. And into this black canvas you can copy paste images so you can collect as many as you want. I'm just going to use this one right now because I don't want to deal with this reference shit anymore. I might get some more later on, but now let's start the modeling process. So let's go to top view, and if you look at this object right here, you're going to notice pretty quickly that it has a pretty unique shape. So it's not just like a square with beveled corners. The bevels here extend a little bit further over the sides, so you might want to keep that in mind as you go. Now we're just going to start with the screen, and shift A, we're going to add a plane, scale that plane up just a little bit so it fits the screen. And we're also going to scale it one more time on the y-axis. By the way, you might want to move your reference image up so it aligns with the center of the world, because the plane is exactly in the center. And then if we select all the geometry, we can just press Ctrl B to bevel and V to bevel the vertices individually, and you just want to move your mouse until that lines up with the reference image. So we're going to go with something like this. You also want to make sure that you have enough geometry here so this looks nice and smooth, but I do plan to use the subdivision surface modifier, so we don't have to use too many vertices. We can just go with something like 12 segments. That's going to be fine. And by the way, if you want to keep good topology, then you probably don't want to have an n-gon here. This might be a problem because later on we're going to use a subdivision surface modifier, and anytime you use a subdivision surface modifier, you definitely don't want to have n-gons because it's going to fuck everything up. So instead we're going to inset this and delete vertices on the inside. That way we can take this outline, we can go to face grid fill up here, and sometimes Blender can figure it out on his own, but sometimes you got to tell him manually. So in this case we got to increase the span to something like, let's try 12. 12 didn't do it, but it looks like 13 works better. So for me 13 and 7 works, but you might have to set it up a little bit differently. And now check this out. Here you can really see it. If we look at the outline of the screen, you can see that this thing up here is not a perfectly straight line. So here's what we're going to do. With Control R, I'm going to add a couple of loop cuts over here to the top. I'm going to add 7 loop cuts because that gives me a cut over here in the middle, and it turns everything into little squares, so that works pretty well. I think 9 would probably be better because you always want to try and keep squares crosshairs if you can, and 9 just gives me a slightly better shape on my faces up here. And then we're going to do the same thing over here on the other side. So in this case, we want to have, what's that, 11 cuts. Now guys, I don't know about you, but for me, Blender crashes all the fucking time for no reason. So you want to make sure to save this file before you continue, before it ruins your day. So just go Control S, and you might want to save this to the same folder where you have your reference images. Okay, so now we have to get the shape of the outline of the screen, and here's how we're going to do that. We want to select all the geometry on the outside of the screen, and then just extrude it down a little bit so we turn this into little faces. You're going to select all those faces in face select mode, and then go Alt-E, open up this extrude menu. You're going to click on extrude faces along normals. By the way, you probably want to do that from top view so you can see how far you're supposed to take this, and we're going to do something like this so it meets the outside of this bevel. And as you can see, now we got to do a little bit of adjustment on these corners. So we're going to adjust the shape up here at the top and also down at the bottom, and I don't want to do this 4 times, so I think I'll just delete 3/4 of this object and use a mirror modifier. So now I just have 1/4. We go to the modifier tab, add modifier, generate. You're going to click on mirror, activate both X and Y axes, and now everything you do on 1/4 is going to appear on the others as well. So now we can pretty easily just take some vertices from over here and just move them downwards a little bit so they align with the reference image. Just be careful when you do this. You don't want to end up having a jagged edge here. And also remember that if you add your subdivision surface modifier, it's going to slightly change the shape, so you want to keep that in mind. You can add your subdivision surface modifier in object mode with Control 2 or Control 3, and it looks like over here on the side we just have to push the vertices a little bit further outwards. So we're going to take these vertices and just shift them on the x-axis a little bit like this, and there we go. I think that looks pretty good. Now let's take a look at this edge over here in our reference image. It looks like at this point we're supposed to start going downwards, so let's go to side view. From side view it looks soft on the edges, so we're going to take the faces from the bottom. We're going to delete those because that's going to sharpen the bottom line, and lift this up to meet this corner. Now here's the problem. We got to adjust the scale because this image is a lot bigger than this one right here, but we can't see the full thing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a vertex from the middle of this object. We're going to extrude it down just so we have a line exactly in the middle of the object. Well, we don't got to do that shit. We already got this line on our grid in the background, and we got to keep in mind that this is the side of the watch and we're looking at the bottom over here. So we're going to first rotate this object by 90 degrees, and we also probably want to rotate the reference image as well. And now we know that we have to align this corner over here, so just carefully place the background image right onto this corner, and then you're going to click on that corner to place your 3D cursor there. And while your 3D cursor is the pivot point, you're going to scale this image until the middle of the watch meets this line in the middle. So you can see we got this little line in the middle of the watch on this little dome thing at the bottom. You want the middle of that little line to be aligned with this central line here. So that's how we know we got the right scale. By the way, we want to sharpen this, but I don't want to add a bevel yet because that's destructive. So I'm just going to select this edge segment in edit mode. We're going to press N, open up this item menu on the side here. You're going to set the mean crease value to 1. That's going to sharpen it. And now because of our mirror modifier, we can only edit this quarter, but we only see this side of the reference image. So let's place the 3D cursor in the middle of the object, and we're going to scale this image by -1 on the x-axis. And then I want to take a vertex from the outside here, and I'm going to extrude that vertex down once, then I'll extrude it outwards, and I'll just keep going all the way around this little shape here. Don't worry if it's a little bit crooked for now. We're going to be able to fix it with our loop tools in a second, so I'll show you that. But just try to trace this outline, and we're going to get up until this little corner. And once we got roughly the right shape, then we're going to use our loop tools to correct this, to keep things organized, because you can see the edges have different lengths. So this is where you got to activate your loop tools. To activate your loop tools, you got to go up here to edit, you got to go to preferences, you got to go to get extensions, you got to type in loop tools, you got to open this thing up. There's going to be an install button. Then once that's done, you go to add-ons and you type in loop, and you check this box, and now you got your loop tools. So now the loop tools is a set of tools which helps you organize your geometry. And for me, it's available when I press W. I got this loop tools thing right here, but they update this shit all the time. So that might not be the case for you if you're watching this 2 years from now. But you can also press N to open up this menu on the side. And if you go to edit, you're going to find your loop tools right here. And these tools are going to be very useful for organizing our geometry. Now, we're not going to use all of them, but all of them can be pretty useful if you want to learn a little bit more about them. I explained them on my Blender Masterclass course in the topology section. So I talk about how you can use these to keep your models clean. But if you don't want to pay for nothing, then just Google them one by one. You're going to find tutorials and you're going to be able to learn something important if you do that. But anyway, we're going to select this little edge segment. We're going to press W loop tools, and you want to use your space tool, and that's going to make them all equally long. And if you want to, you can also use your loop tools relax tool, and that's just going to take the sharp points and it's going to make them a little bit softer. For me, that's not really necessary right now, so I'm not going to use that. But you might want to apply that a couple of times just so you can get a better shape down here on the side. And by the way, my vertex here is a little bit too far down, so I'm going to take it, I'm going to go double G. That's going to slide it along the edge, but if I want to take it the other way, I'll hold down Alt and I'll bring it up to around here somewhere. So I just want to bring it right below this edge. I can also use my 3D cursor to align that. And there we go. Now we got a nice shape for our side profile. And here's what we're going to do next. We're going to take this edge segment here, we're going to bring it over to this corner, so we have another one on the other end. And then we're going to have to fill in the geometry at the bottom segment, and then we're going to be able to use our grid fill tool to fill that in. So check this shit out. And this is one of those things that a lot of experienced Blender users didn't even know about. So if you know this shit, you're going to be able to step your game up pretty good. So check this out. We're going to place the 3D cursor onto this vertex here. Then you select this edge segment, and you have to select this top vertex last. So that last vertex will be your active element. That's why it's white. So you're going to duplicate that and bring it over here to the side. And then up here, change the pivot point from 3D cursor to active element, and then go Shift S, selection to cursor, but keep offset. That's going to snap that object to this part here. Then you just want to rotate it by 90 degrees around the Z-axis. And of course, since these vertices are not connected, you just want to select them and merge them by distance. That's going to turn them into one vertex. So now this is connected. And then we just got to figure out a way to bring this geometry down to the bottom. So we can place the cursor on this bottom vertex, take this edge segment from the top, Shift D, right click, scale it down to 0 on the Z-axis. Of course, before you do that, you have to change the pivot point to 3D cursor. So now you can scale it to 0. And notice how the size doesn't really match properly. So we're going to have to scale this down a little bit. And we can do that by placing the 3D cursor onto the object origin point, which is over here in the middle of this surface. And then you're going to scale this, but you're going to have to press Shift Z to exclude the Z-axis from the scaling, because otherwise it's also going to shrink towards the top, and we don't want that. We just want to make the surface smaller. So S to scale, Shift Z to exclude the Z-axis. And you want to be very precise with this. So you want to look at this vertex down here as you do this. You want these to overlap exactly, and to do that you might want to go to orthographic projection with 5, and then you zoom in all the way. You scale this down with Shift Z like this until these vertices align very closely. And after that, we're going to place the 3D cursor onto this corner so we can select this edge segment, and then we're just going to scale it up a little bit on the X-axis so it aligns with this vertex here. And once that's aligned properly, then we can just select everything and merge our vertices by distance. And once we got this loop closed, now we can select all this geometry around this open surface here, and we go up here to face, we go to grid fill. And when I did this a second ago off camera, Blender figured it out on his own. He was able to complete this properly, but now he made this fucking disaster. So if you don't want to spend 2 days fucking around with these numbers, here's how you can do it properly. You're gonna have to count how many edges you have on one of these sides. So in this case, if we select a top segment over here, you can go to your viewport overlays, you can check statistics, and that's gonna tell you how many elements you got selected. So you can see we got 23 edges selected. That means that this side has 23 edges on it. So if we select all the others, then we can go to face grid fill, and we're gonna use 23 as our span. You wanna try which side works better, because you can also do the other side, but for me in this case, it gave me a fucking mess again. But if we go face grid fill and we set the span to 23, then we just adjust the offset a little bit, and as you can see, it fills in really nice. This, by the way, is a very useful tool if you're trying to model cars or something like that. So just have a look at your object to make sure that everything is okay, to make sure that it's flowing properly. You might want to check it from top view, and as you can see, it aligns pretty damn well, so I'm going to keep it as it is. And now after we got the main body shape down, now we get down here to the bottom, and this is where things get a little bit tricky. So after conducting a little bit of research, or rather by looking at the underside of my girl's Apple Watch, because only a girl or maybe a faggot would wear this watch, I realized that the backside is not really that tricky at all. So we're going to do this by first placing the 3D cursor onto the origin point, which is in the middle of the object. And then we're going to take the vertex segment at the bottom of this object. We need to separate that by selection, that way it gets duplicated and it turns into a separate object. Now we're going to scale this with Shift Z to exclude the Z-axis, and then just extrude it down a little bit on the Z-axis, then extrude it down a little bit further and scale it down a little bit further with Shift Z, then do that one more time and scale it down a little bit more, and maybe you want to do that about 3 times in total. So you want to have 3 steps down here, and that's going to take care of this curved part at the bottom, and then the rest of it is flat, which we can just fill in with a grid fill. So to fill this in with a grid fill, we can just go add modifier, generate mirror on 2 axes. You want to make sure that's above your subdivision surface modifier, because we got to apply it now. And then take this face segment at the bottom, go up here to face grid fill. You want to find out how many vertices we got to use in the span, so we're going to select everything on 1/4 of this object, and I counted 26 edges on 1/4, but for some reason when I go grid fill again, it just takes care of it automatically, so we don't have to do any math down here. But then we're also going to take this surface from the bottom one more time, and we're going to extrude and scale it down a little bit just so we get this extra boundary here. And after that, when we add the subdivision surface modifier, it's going to give us the shape that we want. And then we're going to do the little dome thing. So let's start by adding a circle here, and this is just going to be a placeholder, so don't worry about how many vertices this circle has for now. Just make it roughly the size of this circle which we have in the back in the reference image down here. And then this is the size of the area which we're going to have to clear out down here at the bottom. Matter of fact, it's going to be way easier if we just select this entire surface at the bottom and delete it. And then we take all this geometry, we extrude it inwards, we use our W loop tool circle tool, and that's going to turn this into a nice clean circle so we can just use that. Now I want to keep the meshes separated, so I'm going to extrude this inwards to create the hole, and then I'm going to duplicate that circle from the inside, and that's what I'm going to use to create the dome. So let's get rid of our subdivision surface modifier. Let's go back to side view, bring this down to around here, then we extrude it one more time, then we scale it a bit to make this little bevel on the side. And now I changed my mind because this circle down here at the bottom currently has 92 vertices, which is not good for what we're about to create. You see, I have to make this dome here, but if I just use a UV sphere, sure, I can make the number of segments here 92 and I can make this half of that. But the problem is that a UV sphere is always going to have some bad topology in the form of these triangles down here at the bottom. We have this E-pole, so if we add a subdivision surface modifier, it's going to give us some problems down the line. It's not really visible at this point, but still I don't want to have any triangles. It's just a thing of principle. Maybe it's because I'm autistic, I don't know what it is. But anyway, we're going to add a cube and we're going to subdivide that cube 3-4 times. Apply the subdivision surface modifier, then we're going to go to add modifier deform, and you're going to add the cast modifier, and the cast modifier is going to allow you to shape this into a perfect sphere. So you're going to set the factor value here to 1 and then just apply the cast modifier, and now we got a perfect sphere. So now if we just play around with the scale of this object a little bit, we're going to get the right shape. We're also going to lift it up a little, and now I want to be able to make a knife cut along one of these edges just to make them perfectly straight. So I'm going to press K to activate my knife tool, click right here, press X to cut along the x-axis, then press C to cut through the other side of the object, click over here on the other side, hit enter, and then just complete this entire loop with your selection, Control E, Mark C. In face select mode, select this area above the surface at the bottom, and then just get rid of that area, and now we have a perfect little dome for this shape. So we can use the geometry from the outside now to extrude this little part. So you want to scale it up to make this little bevel, then extrude it upwards to fit it into the hole, and there you go. Now you can subdivide this all day and your topology is going to be perfect. Of course, we also want to take these edges over here and we want to bevel them just to sharpen this part up, and you want to have a bevel here which has 2 segments and a profile shape value 1. Now let's just leave this thing be for now. Maybe we can parent these objects to the rest of the watch with Control P, and then we're going to take them, we're going to hide them with H because we don't want them in the way of anything. And this is where things really get tricky, because now we got to make this shit over here on the side. And anytime you're fusing things together on a curved surface like this, you're going to have a real headache afterwards. So buckle up, crack a beer, because you might be here for a long time. If you're a beginner watching this, good luck to you, because even I don't know if I'll be able to do this shit properly. So the first thing we want to take care of before we try to make this is our geometric consistency. We want to make sure that everything is made up of little squares. And right now we have these little rectangles, and that's going to be a pretty big problem if we try to do this circular shape over here. So we got to do something about these little rectangles, and here's what we're going to do. Let's duplicate this object. We're going to lift it above the scene and hide it just so we have a backup in case we fuck up and we got to come back. We're going to select this edge at the top, and in this little menu over here that appears when you press N in edit mode, you're going to set the mean crease value to 1 to sharpen this part up all the way, and then you're going to set the subdivision surface level to 1, and you're going to apply the subdivision surface modifier. Now once you do this, you see we got more geometry, but it's still not little squares, so we got to get rid of some of these horizontal edge segments. And I don't know if your geometry looks exactly the same as mine, it probably doesn't, but I'm going to select this one, then I'm going to skip 2, select another one, skip 2, select one more, and so on. And then near the bottom I want to select a few extra, so I'm going to slightly increase the density, and we're going to press X dissolve edges. Now let's see if that worked. To see if that worked, we're going to select one edge segment over here on the side, and by the way, we got to go back because we already fucked up. We applied the subdivision surface modifier before we mirrored this, so now we got these little soft corners here which are going to give us some problems. So we got to undo this, bring back your mirror modifier and set that to both axes, place that above the subdivision surface modifier and apply it, and then you can apply one level of subdivision surface. And now I just do the same thing that we did before, so just dissolve a couple of these edge segments, select one of these horizontal edge segments on the side, and you're going to go to select, go down to select loops and click on edge rings. That's going to select all the parallel edge loops. So now you can press W loop tool space. That's going to make all the selected edges equally long in each segment. As you can see, that gives us little squares, but they're still not perfect squares, so we still got to do a little bit more work. So we're going to go back and just dissolve one more edge segment, maybe 2 more edge segments, and then repeat the thing with the edge rings one more time. So let's see if that's going to work a little bit better. So select edge rings, W loop tool space. It still wasn't perfect, so I did it one more time with one more edge loop, but then I got pretty nice little squares. This should be good enough, so hopefully this is going to work. I don't know if it's going to work, we might have to do this shit all over again later on. So now we have to attach this circular shape over here to the side, and I'm talking about this extended semicircle. So there's a semicircle here, it runs all the way along the edge here, and then you have another one over here at the top. The base, by the way, doesn't have this cut for the circle. So just to give you a clear image of what we're doing, this is supposed to look something like this. We're supposed to have a circle. We're going to flip that circle sideways, then add a loop cut here, slide it inwards, another one over here, slide it inwards, select one half of this circle and stretch it out, and this object we're somehow supposed to attach to the side of our watch. So now the question is, how thick is this circle supposed to be and how long is it supposed to be? Well, figuring out the length is not too difficult because we got that over here in our reference image. So that's supposed to be something like this if we extend it all the way to the side. And let's just be precise here. I think it's supposed to be symmetrical on both sides. So we're going to place the origin point into the middle. To do that, you select all this geometry, you place the 3D cursor into the middle in edit mode, and then in object mode you go object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor, and now you want to snap that somewhere into the middle of the object with your 3D cursor in object mode. So the problem is that we can't just use a Boolean modifier because that's going to fuck up our geometry around here pretty badly, but we can use the shrink wrap modifier, and I think that might work quite well. Let's just get a picture from side view so we can see how thick this is supposed to be. So I got this other image over here from Google. I just googled Apple Watch. You should be able to find a picture of the side view which shows you this little detail, and you want to have that image saved to your computer so you can load it in as another background reference image. So we're going to go Shift A, image reference, open up this second image. We're going to rotate that sideways like this. Then we're going to scale it so that it fits the size of the object which we have already. It doesn't have to be exact, just try to get it as close as you can. And you can see that we already got the shape pretty damn close, but if you didn't, then you're just going to scale this circle down by a little bit to fit the right size. Delete the other half, make sure that this one is placed correctly, and then mirror this over the middle one more time so it snaps over to the other side, and then you can fill these two back together. Now this is going to be your reference shape. This is not the shape that we're going to attach to the body of the watch. That's going to be something different, and we're going to have to specifically count the number of faces we have on this surface back here, and then we're going to have to fuse that together with a new circle which has a number of vertices that's based on the surface in the back which this circle is supposed to overlap with. So check this out. We know the circle is supposed to be here, so we can select the surface just outside that circle like this, and in this case our shape is very close to this edge segment at the top, which is going to be problematic, and it has a little bit more space down here at the bottom. So we're just going to cheat a little bit and we're going to lower it down just a little bit, and then let's select that surface just outside this circle. We want to select a square surface. You also have to keep in mind whether the middle of your circle is supposed to be an edge or a vertex. In this case for us we have 9 faces over here, which means we have a face in the middle, which means we're supposed to have an edge on the side of our circle here. But now we have this 9 by 9 surface selected. So here's what we're going to do now. You're going to delete this surface and select the edge segment that's left behind here. Count how many edges you got here. We got 36 edges, so that means this full circle is supposed to have 36 vertices. So place the 3D cursor into the middle of this circle that we have here from before. Shift A, add a new circle, align that circle with your view, set the vertices to 36, and scale this down to the size of this circle. So scale it down this big, that we can get rid of this shape that we have here from before. So let's just lift it up by 1 unit. That way if we want to bring it back for whatever reason, we just lower it by 1 unit. And then of course we also have to rotate this so we have an edge on the side. Now how far you have to rotate it is a question of mathematics, how many degrees between the vertices. In this case we got 36 vertices, so 360 is a full circle divided by 36, that's 10. Of course 10 is just going to bring us to the next vertex, so we still got a vertex, so we got to rotate this by 5 degrees. And let's also cheat a little bit more just to make our job easier. We're going to align this vertex next to the top edge with the edge over here, and that's also going to bring this edge to the inside of this edge segment over here on the side, and that's going to make everything a little bit easier. So now if we delete this 4 by 9 surface here, if we select this section like this, we should have, let's see, 17 edges, and hopefully this side of the circle is also going to have 17 edges, excluding the edge at the top and the one at the bottom, so it's a little bit less than half, and that's something that we can merge with the edges on the outside of this hole. So now let's undo a couple of steps. So we bring back this surface on the inside here, make sure that this circle is a separate object, so you're going to fill that circle with F. In object mode, add modifier, you're going to go to deform and click on shrink wrap, set the wrap method here to project. And by the way guys, pay attention to this shit carefully. If you're not familiar with any of the stuff that I'm doing, you want to learn this shit because this is going to be really important. The people that can pull this stuff off have an elite level of 3D modeling skills, so if you can do this right, maybe you can even do it better than I did, maybe you can do it without cheating. Those are the people who have a little bit more status in the 3D modeling community. So wrap method project, target, you're going to target the surface below and then just push it backwards on the y-axis so it wraps against the surface underneath. As you can see now, this circle is projected onto the object below. So all you gotta do now is apply the shrink wrap modifier, then take the circle, take the object behind it, join those two together with Ctrl J, and now you can delete this 4x9 surface, and you should be able to take the edges from this side of the circle, and you should be able to merge those together with these edges with W bridge edge loops. This W bridge edge loops thing is only gonna work in edge select mode, so you gotta be in edge select mode. And now the problem is that when you just merge these edges like this, you have these very long faces connecting with this corner right here, and that's probably going to give you some shading artifacts and deformations. So what we can do instead is go undo a couple of steps, also undo a few more to before we deleted this surface, and we're going to deselect these three faces and also these three faces down here. Now if we delete this surface, we're still going to have the same number of edges on the inside. They're just going to be a little bit closer to the circle. So now we're going to select all these edges like this. Maybe it's better if you use Alt right click. For some reason, you gotta do it twice here. Deselect this edge segment with your brush select tool and middle click. Then take these edges over here on the inside and then go W bridge edge loops. Let's see what happens. It worked out pretty well. We just got a little bit of this twisting shit over here, which you want to avoid by just sliding these vertices back and forth with double G. Maybe you want to bring the far away vertices a little bit closer. You just want to try and keep everything a little bit more consistent. And then we can just delete the rest of this circle here. So delete those vertices. You can even delete the face on the inside. Delete all the faces over here. Let's delete everything up until the middle. Now we also got to take care of this part over here where we have a little bit of a gap. So place the 3D cursor right there. Select this edge segment at the top. Extrude right click, scale to 0 with Shift X to exclude the X axis and scale this to 0. That should connect everything over here. If it doesn't, then just snap this vertex to the next one on the circle and do the same thing down here at the bottom. So cursor on the last vertex in the circle. Select this edge segment, extrude, scale to 0 with Shift X and snap this last vertex over to the 3D cursor here. You might want to slide this one to the side a little bit, but that probably doesn't really matter. So now let's just test out what happens when we take this object and we extrude it while it's under the influence of a subdivision surface modifier. And by the way, I'm going to get rid of all this shit on the other quarters so it doesn't get in my way. Maybe not the back side because I want those to stay clean. I don't want the hole back there. So just delete this 1/4. Then take this edge segment here. You're going to extrude that outwards a little bit, bring back your subdivision surface modifier. And this is what I was telling you. This is why I want to keep everything a little bit more consistent, because otherwise you're going to see these little edges over here. You can see that's not really clean. So we got to do something about that. If you want to be able to see this type of stuff more clearly, what you do is you go up here to your viewport shading settings and you go from studio to matte cap and you change this matte cap to, let's say, the red one. And this one is really shiny. So this light here is going to help you spot these shading artifacts a little bit better. So you can see because of the reflections of the light, it looks like this part here is a little bit busted up. You can also use this one here with the lines, which is similar to that method they use for detecting dents on cars. I don't find this one to be very useful. I just use the red one. So we have this little problem here, but this is nothing that a bevel can't fix. So if we select this edge segment and we go Ctrl B to bevel, we add a bevel which once again has two segments in a profile shape of 1. And as you can see now, this looks a lot smoother, but it is a little bit too sharp. So maybe if we take these vertices over here which are stopping us from making this bevel wider, and if we just slide those vertices backwards a little bit further, maybe then we're going to have a little bit more space for this bevel. So if we dissolve the edges created by this bevel, we can create that bevel one more time and take it a little bit further. Or if you don't want to deal with all that bullshit with sliding your vertices around, you can undo that. Keep the bevel that you had here before, and you're going to select the edge segment on the inside, and you're going to bevel that again with Ctrl B, but this time you want to have a profile shape value of 0.5, and that way you're going to get this nice soft bevel. And as you can see now, that looks a little bit wider and a little bit softer. I think it looks pretty nice. Or again, alternatively, you can just take the inner segment, you can slide it back and forth a little bit to make everything a little bit softer, but that might make some of the artifacts come up again. So just make sure you don't have any artifacts if you use this method. I think it worked out pretty well for me, so I'm just gonna keep it like this. So now that we got this shape fused into the watch, let's take a little commercial break and then we're gonna continue with the rest of this part on the side. You know when you turn on your television and they hit you with all these prostate medication advertisements and all this other dumb shit? Well, somebody made those animations in 3D in a program like Blender. So if you want to be able to make those types of animations yourself, if you want to get a job in television advertising, if you want to be able to produce high quality industry standard animations, I got a whole course. Check it out. It's about this fucking toothbrush that you can see behind me. Now that's enough, let's get back to the tutorial. Now this next part is gonna feel a lot like brain surgery. It's gonna be pretty tedious work. We gotta use this hole or this shape that we attach to the side of this watch to now create this thing sticking out, which has a button on the inside of it. It's not a button, it's a wheel. Well, maybe it's a button at the same time, but whatever. We gotta extrude this shape out so we reach the top of this surface. So that's gonna be around here somewhere. We're gonna scale it to 0 on the y-axis here. And then let's go to front view. You're gonna see that we have this little moon shape over here on the side of the button. That's this thing right here. So first we're gonna going to use the geometry from this semicircle that we have over here on the side to try and roughly shape out this moon. And before we do that, let's place the 3D cursor on the outside of this area here in the middle of the circle. And now we take these edges over here from the side. That's 15 edges for me. And it's very important that you pay attention to how many edges you have here. So I got 15. I'm going to extrude them out a little bit, scale them down on the x-axis to around here. Let's also push them inwards because in a second we're going to fuse them together with these points at the top of this triangle. We can also scale them down a little bit. We're going to use W loop tools relax to make the shape a little bit nicer. And now this is not the final shape yet, but this is roughly where this line is supposed to be located. And then we want to place the 3D cursor in the middle of this moon shape, so on this edge right here. And remember, we got 15 edges here, so if we also connect these little edges over here at the top to form this little triangle, that's going to give us 2 more edges, so 17 edges in total. So if we consider this to be 1/4 of a circle, that thing has 17 edges. That means the full circle would have, what, 68 edges. So let's try Shift A, add a new circle. We're going to align that with our view, and let's try 68 vertices. Let's see what happens. By the way, you want to be in vertex view before you do this. See, if we switch to vertex view now, then this little menu disappears, so we need that shit back. So let's do this one more time. So first go to vertex select mode, then add a circle, align it with your view, 68 vertices. And now we're also going to go to wireframe view, and we're going to use this little menu down here to adjust the position of this circle because we need it to be on top of this little wheel, but more importantly we need it to be aligned with this little curve that we created over here on this little moon thing. Now the reason I want to keep this little menu is so that I can make sure I have the right number of vertices to match this geometry here. And you can see, first of all, the problem is that I have a vertex in the middle and I want to have an edge there. And then on top of that, you can see that the vertices here are a little bit more concentrated than the ones on the outside. So let's try reducing the number of vertices. Let's see what happens if we do 62. 66 seems to work quite well if the circle's placed right here. So you can see that every edge over here on the side has a match. So now we want to use this circle to fill in this little moon thing. So we can get rid of this edge segment that we created here a second ago. And the reason I'm using a circle to do this and not just this geometry which I had before, because this edge here is perfectly going to connect to a circle on the inside. So this gap here is going to be aligned properly. And if we just do it manually with the geometry from over here, it's going to look a little bit crooked. It's not going to look nice and clean. And when you're making electronic products, you're going to want this shit to be nice and clean. So also let's duplicate this circle before we do anything else, and we can separate that to a new object just so it's not in the way. You can also go to object mode and hide it with H. But now we're going to delete everything on the outside of this circle except this geometry on the inside. So select all the geometry from the outside like this. You still want to keep this vertex that's sticking out over the edge because we're going to use that for a little bit longer. And then you're going to shift this object to the side a little bit so that these last edges overlap with these vertices over here at the end. You want to be very precise with this, so we're going to overlap this thing here. And let's go down to the bottom. Let's see if that works. It doesn't really overlap properly, so we can just place the cursor onto this vertex. Or maybe we can slide this vertex instead of snapping the vertex from the circle onto this vertex. So if we just slide this to the side a little bit like this, now we can place the 3D cursor on top of this vertex and then scale this vertex to 0 on the 3D cursor with Shift Y to exclude the Y-axis. Same thing over here at the top one more time, so scale it down with Shift Y. And now you want to remember that we had this circle over here before, and the reason we need this circle to stay is because we're going to have to remember the exact middle of this object, and the middle of this circle is going to be the point where we're going to add this little wheel. So since we shifted this little edge segment on the inside, we also have to shift the circle, but the question is, how far do we have to shift it to make it align exactly? I guess it doesn't really matter too much. We can just make it pretty close, but I want to be exact. So I'm going to place the 3D cursor onto this middle edge on the inner segment here on this little moon thing. Place the cursor right there, then select this circle on the inside, which is a separate object. Select all the edges, deselect this edge on the side and reselect it. So now it's the active element, and we're going to use this active element shit, Shift S, selection of cursor, keep offset. There we go. And there we go. Now everything is nice and clean. Now our circle is in place. So let's take this inner edge segment. We're going to use W loop tool space. As you can see, that just organizes the edges a little bit better, but it doesn't change the shape of the curve. So now if we merge this with M merge vertices by distance, we can take all the edges except the last two from this shape, and the same thing on the inner shape, and we should be able to go W bridge edge loops. Fill this here with a little triangle at the top and the bottom, and let's do a loop cut here and slide this vertex inwards so it's not a triangle but it's a little quad. Now this is where the surgery gets a little bit more difficult. So we're going to select all these vertices on the outside. We're going to get rid of them. We don't need them. And let's bring back the circle we got right here. Now this circle, we're going to extrude it down to the base. So place the 3D cursor at the base, extrude scale to 0 on the y-axis. Let's also get rid of the subdivision surface modifier. We're going to fill this with F, and we're going to make a bevel with Control B. We just want one segment on this bevel. And now the reason this is so important, because we have to integrate this section of this object and attach it onto this part so that we can fit a wheel in here. So we got to separate this little section and wire it with everything else. So let's delete the face in the middle. We don't need that one. Then let's get rid of the subdivision surface modifier in this object, let's go to object shade flat, and let's select all the faces on this new shape that we created which have a match on this outer shape. So you can see they extend a little bit further out because we didn't do the loop tools operation, but it's gonna look like this. So everything outside of this area. So once you got those selected, you press Ctrl I to invert the selection and delete faces. And then this is where things get a little bit crazy. So now we're gonna take this last vertex, we're gonna slide it outwards with double G and Alt. Same thing over here on the other side. It doesn't matter how far you push it as long as it crosses this edge. And then we have to use a knife tool to make a cut along this edge from front view. So let's start our knife cut right here on this vertex, and we're gonna end it somewhere over here. So press C to cut through. Now you want to be careful when you do this because that's also gonna make a cut on the back side of the object potentially. But let's not worry about that too much. Let's just try to make it somewhere roughly at this point. So let's make the cut right here, and then we're gonna bring it all the way to over here, cut through, get rid of this last segment, we don't need that. And also let's do the same thing one more time at the top. So make a cut right here, delete everything on the outside of that cut. And now if we join these two objects back together, we should be able to connect these shapes. Of course, we have to take these outer edge loops from this new shape. We got to use our W loop tool space to space them out so they align with these vertices here. Or rather, before we do that, since they're not properly aligned, you want to make sure that these last vertices over here are exactly aligned. So scale them to 0 with Shift Y while the 3D cursor is over here at the point. And then we're going to apply loop tool space to these edge segments. And now they should be aligned properly to where we can merge vertices by distance. Let's check to make sure if everything's connected. It's looking pretty good. So let's also add a loop cut here where we can connect these vertices. The one at the bottom is not going to be aligned the same way, so you want to adjust that manually. And by the way, this stuff over here, I think we're supposed to push all the way down to the end. So we're going to take these edge segments, we're going to slide them inwards with double G like this, and we take these face segments on the inside and we also push them down a little bit. Maybe not this one over here because that's going to tighten up our bevel. We don't want that, but we're going to bring this closer. And then once you bring that closer like this, and when I say closer, I mean exactly aligned with this edge on the outside. Now we can use the 3D cursor to snap this vertex to this one. We can fill this in. Now these are two triangles, so we dissolve this edge, we slide this one backwards a little bit so we have a quad there, and we also got to connect everything down here at the bottom. So we're just going to snap some things around a little bit. Now we got a triangle down here and here as well, so let's see if we can fix that. We subdivide this edge so this turns into a quad. Then instead of having this vertex connect to this one, let's connect it to this one here. And then we can dissolve this edge, slide this inwards. It's not really perfect, but they are quads only, so it's pretty good. And all we got to do now is fill in everything over here on the inside using the geometry from the outside. By the way, this edge segment down here is a little bit deeper inside than the one at the top here. So we're going to select this one and align it with the top using our 3D cursor. And then we can fill in the faces at the top and the bottom. And we can just keep filling everything in using the geometry over here. So we're going to duplicate it, snap it to the end, extrude a couple of faces here so we can fill this here with F. And now once we got that done, hopefully we can just select this and go face grid fill. There we go, that turned out pretty nice. So let's see what happens when we add our subdivision surface modifier. It's looking pretty good. Now let's check if it works when we add our bevels to the edges as well. So we're going to select all these edges, Control B to bevel. Here we want to have 2 segments, shape value 1. We're going to uncheck loop slide to see which one works better, loop slide or no loop slide. I think no loop slide works a little bit better. And there we go, I think this shape turned out pretty damn good. If you want, you can add some extra geometry here to tighten up this corner. But now we have to duplicate this shape and bring it over to the other side where we have another version of this arc here. And to do that, let's undo a couple of steps to before we added these bevels, because otherwise they're just going to get in the way. They're going to make shit harder for us. And now we delete some geometry over here on the side. We delete these faces. Now I want to bring back the circle I had here before, but it looks like I fucked up. I lost that circle, and that's not great because now I don't know where the exact middle of the wheel is, but fuck it, we're just going to work with this geometry that we have over here. We're going to roughly eyeball the middle, so Shift D, scale this to -1 on the x-axis over the 3D cursor. Now let's bring back another circle which we're going to place here in the middle, and then let's see if we can fit everything according to this circle. So the circle should be around here somewhere. When we create this circle, it still has the same radius we set for it before, so don't change the size of the circle because that's going to be a perfect match. And now you can see that based on this circle, this geometry should be over here. It doesn't really have to be exact. The closer you can get with this stuff, the better. I just wanted to keep everything surgical, but it looks like it's too late for that. Then we also have to make some more space down here to bring in the bottom part of this shape. Our loop flow seems to be a little bit fucked up, but who cares? Let's select this segment from the inside here, Shift D, scale it to -1 on the x-axis. We should be able to connect that with this part with W bridge edge loops. And then we just gotta spend a bunch of time wiring everything together. So first we're gonna align these vertices from the inside here. Then we gotta bridge these edge segments on the inside so we can fill this here. So W bridge edge loops, fill this with a triangle, fill this with a triangle, add a little loop gut so we don't have triangles there anymore. Matter of fact, we don't even have to do this because we could have just filled this in and then slid this edge segment to the end. That way the loop flow is going to be a little bit better. And now I want to make sure that this is lined up here with the top, so we're going to slide this outwards a little bit with double G and then scale it to 0 on the Z-axis. Same thing one more time at the bottom, so cursor over here, slide this outwards with double G and Alt, and then scale to 0 again. And now we can fill this with a triangle, fill this at the bottom with a triangle. I'm going to align this vertex with this one down here, so I'm going to use my 3D cursor for that as well. One more time over here at the top, and then we can fill them with a new edge, add a loop cut to that edge, which we're going to slide here, so we can fill a little quad over here and also at the top here. And then we have to fill in the back side of this shape. So first, let's place the cursor here. We're going to extrude everything except these last couple of vertices, and we're going to align them with the 3D cursor by scaling them to 0. Maybe not to 0, but let's just scale them a little bit and push them further back like this. And now to fill in the back side, we're going to place the cursor in the middle so we can duplicate all the geometry from this quarter. We don't want all of it. We don't want to copy this inner part. So we're going to deselect everything over here, starting from this little moon. Then we want to get rid of everything on the inside over here. We also don't want to duplicate this side. Also get rid of this stuff over here. And once you get rid of all that, now you should be able to do Shift D, right click, scale to -1 on the x-axis. Make sure you correct your normals when you do this with Shift N. And then we're just going to take care of our geometry. So we're going to delete these little things on the outside over here. First, let's fill in the top. So we're going to line up these vertices. Then, since we have 3 edges over here and we only have 2 here, we're going to have to add a loop cut here to get rid of this triangle. Now we have 3 on both sides. So now hopefully we can just use our 3D cursor like this, extrude this geometry, align it with the 3D cursor, fill this, fill it on the other side as well, and just do that a couple more times until we filled in the entire shape. And then once we fill everything in, we probably have to work on the alignment of these vertices a little bit. It looks like we fucked something up pretty bad over here on the back side, so let's just move that to the side a little bit. We accidentally merged some vertices which weren't supposed to be merged. And here's a little time lapse of me wiring everything up at the bottom. I had some trouble over here. It's kind of boring. I don't really have anything to explain to you here. It's just manually wiring shit up. So here's how I'm doing it. Hopefully it's going to help you out if you're in a similar situation as I am. And then once I wire everything up, I just fill in the surface at the top, and there we go. That's the end of it. Okay, next let's do this adjustment wheel right here. Now I did the counting. I counted 19 of these holes over here. I don't know if I counted right, but let's do 19. So we're going to start this by adding a circle in the middle of this circle, which we have here from before, because this is the exact middle of the hole. And we're going to do Shift A mesh circle. I want a circle which has 19 times 4 vertices. So that's 76 here. We're going to line that with a view. And then we go top view, we extrude it backwards. Let's say 1 unit, then we extrude it again forwards by the same distance, so 0.1 meters. We fill the front, we fill the back, we take the front and the back edge loops, and we're going to bevel those with Control B. Now I'm going to bevel them so they have, let's say, something like, what's that, 5 segments. But I'll go to front view because I don't want to bevel this too far. I want the bevel to reach somewhere between this red line and the cuts on the outside. So my bevel is going to reach this area approximately. And I'm going to use my loop tools to soften this up a little bit. So select one segment, select loops, go to select edge rings, W loop tools, space, W loop tools, relax. I did that one more time with 4 segments on the bevels instead of 5, so I think that looks a little bit better. And now we said we wanted 4 segments per cut, so we're going to separate a section with 4 segments right here. We're going to mark seams around it, delete the faces in the front and the back, delete everything except this little section, and then just delete all this geometry over here in the middle. We're going to use that hole to create this cut here. So you can add your subdivision surface modifier, you can slide this up a little bit, slide it inwards again, and maybe you want to slide this inwards with double G and Alt. Once you set up the shape on one side, you're going to delete the other half. Now you can copy this and mirror it to the other side with your 3D cursor. And now to fill in the inside, we're first going to count how many edges we have over here on the side. So if I select them, I can see we got 8 edges. So I'm going to fill this part here with a new edge. I'll make a loop cut there. I'll lift that loop cut up a little bit, and with Control B, I'm going to bevel it. You press Control B, then you press V, because then you bevel just the vertex. And we're going to set this to 8 segments because, like I said, we have 8 edges here. You want to push it all the way to the side, and then you just select one side, select the other side. When you got them selected, you go W bridge edge loops. You do the same thing on the other side. Now if you want to check the depth, you want to select all the edges around the outside. So deselect the extra edges in this case because we don't want those. And over here on the side, when you press N in the item section, you're going to set the increase value to 1, and you can see what this looks like. So now if you want to, you can select this inner segment with your 3D cursor over here. You can scale that up to make it a little bit more shallow. And then we just place the cursor over here in the middle where the origin point used to be. We select everything, Alt E spin, use duplicates. You want to have 19 steps here, delete the double section, then merge your vertices by distance. and the rest is pretty easy. Now you want to make this little extra red segment here, so you're going to extrude this little piece like this. You're going to take this section here, you're going to extrude that inwards a little bit. Then we're going to use a loop cut over here, which we're also going to push inwards a little bit further with Alt S. And then these edge segments over here, I'm just going to slide inwards a little bit with double G to make this part a little bit softer. Now I didn't want to make this part here completely flat, so instead I select this, I go to face grid fill, and then if I select this entire circular surface, I can separate it to a new object. And we'll go to front view, we'll select the face in the middle, select your proportional editing up here, you're going to set that to sphere. And now if you use G to move this, you can push it outwards a little bit on the y-axis. That's going to make it slightly round, so you can look at that from top view right here. You can see that it's a little bit curved, and then you're just going to use your active element thing over here to snap this back into place. So let's say 3D cursor over here, select this, make this your active element, shift S, cursor to selection, and then you just join them back together. You merge your vertices by distance. That didn't work because some of them are not aligned properly for whatever reason, so we're just going to delete this section and bridge it again. And there you go. Once that's done, now you select all the edges which you want to sharpen. So up here I can do Shift G, select similar crease. That's going to select all the creased edges. I'm going to get rid of the crease and then also add these two edges here to the selection, bevel everything. So I want two segments, shape value 1, and there we go. We got our fucking wheel. This one didn't turn out as nice as the other one that I had over here before, so I'm going to get rid of this one and I'm going to use the one that I had before instead, because I think it looks a million times nicer. You just want to make sure that it fits into your little hole here, so you want to check to make sure there isn't too much clipping. You might have to adjust the shape according to this cut over here, but overall it turned out pretty nice. So there's the fucking wheel. Next, let's quickly do these buttons over here. Now this is going to be pretty easy. I'm going to go to front view and I'm going to clear out a large area where I want to fit this button, so I'll select a surface like this, and I'm just going to delete that surface, and instead I'm just going to place some circles on the inside and connect them. So let's just make sure that my geometry allows me to do that. Let's say I want this area here to be half a circle. That's going to be 15 edges, and then hopefully this part over here is also going to give me 15 edges. So there we go, it does. That means that I can place my cursor between these vertices, add a circle which is going to have 30 vertices, align it with my view, and then scale the fucker down to around this big, push it inwards a little bit. And I changed my mind now because this is supposed to be the middle of the circle, so I'm supposed to have an edge on top which would make it like this, and I'm trying to connect this edge to this one, so I'm not sure if I'm going to have the right number of edges here. So let's see, this here is now 16 edges and this here is probably going to be 17. So let's check. Yeah, that's 17, so we got to add a different circle. So get rid of this one, just add another one, Shift A, add a circle. Now these 17 edges here are more than half the circle because they include the edges on the middle, so we subtract those two, and then 17 is 1/2 of the circle. That means we need 17 times 2, that's 34, plus 2, that's 36. So 36 edges aligned with our view, and we're going to rotate that by 5 degrees because that brings my edge up here. So there we go. Now we select this side of the circle, then select the edges on the outside. We're going to go W bridge edge loops. I fucked up my calculation. I said 17 on one side. Even after you remove the two edges, it's supposed to be 16 per side after you remove the edges. So this is supposed to have 34 vertices and not 36. So when we add this circle, we rotate it by 360 divided by 34 divided by 2, and that gives us 5.29. So now hopefully we can bridge these two sections together. W bridge edge loops. Fuck me, it still doesn't work. We still fucked up again because now this part over here has 18 edges. I guess I'm retarded, but this part here is 17 edges, so we're supposed to have 15 on this side plus 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. So it's supposed to be 15 times 2 plus 2, which is 32. And then we rotate that one by 5.125, and then finally we should be able to bridge these edge loops. There we go. Now I'm going to tear this vertex with V and tear this one down here. Select this segment, push it out to the other side where we're going to do the same thing, but it looks like we got to make a little bit more space down here so we can fit this circle in there. So let's move this out of the way a bit, and then we take these two segments and we join them together with bridge edge loops. Looks like we fucked this up because I rotated this by the wrong angle, so let's just do it one more time. Circle with 32 vertices which we align with our view. Now 360 divided by 32 is 11.25, divided by 2 is 5.652, not 152. So rotate this by 5.625. I'm losing my fucking mind over here. And now finally we can do W bridge edge loops. Then I gotta take this side, I gotta flip it over and bring it to the other side where I can connect it with these other edge loops. Hopefully my normals are not gonna give me trouble, so let's try. That worked pretty well. And then we just bring the 3D cursor here, we extrude this geometry, fill this here, and we fill this here. Same thing up at the top. And then once we got our hole, we can extrude this backwards. We can take this geometry, we're gonna duplicate that and separate it by selection. Then you select it all, Alt E, extrude faces along normals, and you're gonna extrude them inwards a little bit. This just gives us this little platform which separates the button from the outside of the gap. So now we take this part, we extrude it out. I'm gonna turn off my subdivision surface modifier because I want to fill this with an n-gon to begin with. Then I'm gonna bevel this corner here, set the profile profile shape here to 0.5, and then we're going to get rid of this and we're going to use our face grid fill tool. And there we go. This is the type of shit you got to deal with when Blender can't figure it out on its own. So we got to adjust the span. For me, 7 span and 5 offset works. And I feel like there's supposed to be a separation between the button and the floor. And I also think this bevel up here should be a little bit bigger. So let's do that one more time. And then I want a loop cut over here so I can take this part on the inside, Alt-E extrude faces along normals. We're going to pull that inwards and delete those faces because you can't really see them. Take this part, we're going to bevel that 2 segments, shape value 1. And also it looks like we got to extrude this part backwards up here and also bevel the corner. And then we go object shade smooth. We might use a subdivision surface modifier. By the way, we're going to have to do something about cleaning up this geometry around the button because it looks pretty shitty right now. Not that it really matters, it's just not very nice to look at. And once we do that, we're going to bevel this part on the outside. First, we want 1 segment, and then we're going to take those 2 new edge loops and we're going to bevel them with 2 segments to sharpen them. And there we go, we got our button. I feel like I made the bevel a little bit too large, but that's an easy fix because all we got to do is get rid of this bevel, place the cursor on the surface in the front, bring this over here to the top, bridge it with the outside of this surface down here around the button, and then just do your beveling one more time. So this time a slightly smaller bevel, and there we go. I think that button looks good. We just need this tiny little hole here. I think you guys probably know how this is done, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'll select 9 faces here, extrude them inwards, use my loop tool circle to turn them into circle, and then extrude that inwards. On the inside here, we're going to mark the outline with creases, also sharp edges. And then this part here, first we want one segment bevel, and then we bevel these 2 edge loops with 2 segments, and there we go. Now we got a little hole. Okay, so now we're gonna move over to the side of the watch where we have the strap attached to the fucking watch. And this is gonna be pretty tough to make, especially if you want to keep good topology. But we're gonna go to the side view, and you can see in the background reference we have this shape carved out of the body of the watch, and that's where you insert the strap. So we're gonna go to edit mode like this, and by the way, you might want to duplicate this and bring it over here to the side somewhere so you have a backup one more time. But we're gonna press K to activate the knife tool. We're gonna start it around here somewhere, and make sure that you enable C to cut through as well. And we're going to bring this cut up to around here somewhere, and we're just going to trace this shape with our knife. So let's see what happens. The problem here is that your geometry is going to be quite inconsistent here. There's not really a way to improve that too much, but then we make the final cut over here at the bottom, hit enter, and there we go. Now we carved this shape into the surface. Now once we cut this out, now we have to do a little bit of cleanup because currently this shit looks ridiculous. We got n-gons all over the place, we got triangles, and under the influence of a subdivision surface modifier, you're just going to notice all sorts of shading artifacts, which isn't good. So first of all, we're going to select the shape which we cut out with a knife tool, Control E mark seam, and that just makes it easier to select this in face select mode. We can just press L, and that's going to select this entire surface. Now before we do anything, let's work a little bit on the geometric consistency. So for example, if we have an area where 2 vertices are very close together like here, we want to bring those together so we can merge them into one. So in this case, we slide this one up with double G, we slide this one down, then we bring this down, and we merge our vertices by distance. Same thing up here at the top with this one. Over here we got another situation going on, so we're gonna just clean up some of these, and just to avoid having to do everything twice on the other side as well, I got a seam marked here and another one over here. So with L I can just select this area, also this part down here, I can delete that, and then using my 3D cursor I just bring whatever I have on this side over to the other side. So I scale that to -1, correct to normals, and there we go. Now here's one of the problems you really have to pay attention to. When you have a triangle here, you're gonna notice that there's like a little bump in your shading, so you can clearly see that there's something going on over here. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it looks pretty clear on my screen. If I use my shiny matte cap, I think you guys can see there's like a little pimple here. So one of the ways you can fix that is to just select this vertex here on top of this triangle and just use Alt S, try to pull it inwards a little bit. And if you play around with that for just a little bit, you're going to be able to make it a lot smoother. But you also want to remember that this is going to look a little bit different when we delete this surface on the inside here. Maybe you don't want to delete it just yet. Maybe you just want to separate it by selection and hide it. But now some of the shading artifacts here look less visible than before. So this shit is going to be really complicated, guys. I don't really know how to explain this in an easy way because it's not easy. But if you ever held one of these in your hand and tried to pull the strap out, you know that there's like a shape cut out in here. So this side and this side are going to be connected with bridge edge loops, and we're going to figure out how to connect everything. So we can select a couple of the edges from both sides first. Let's also do the top edges over here, and then once we get to a certain point, we can't really just continue bridging edge loops like this, and it's going to be because of the angles of these edges here. So at some point they're just going to be super thin and super uncomfortable to work with. So what we can do instead is add a loop cut in the middle, add another loop cut over here, and then using some of the geometry from that new loop cut, I can fill in this gap right here. So then I just keep adding some loop cuts here so I can continue connecting this down here. It might be a good idea to do this with flat shading and no subdivision surface, because that's going to make the imperfections on this surface a little bit more visible. So if I have some weird bending, you're going to see that it's going to be pretty visible like it is over here on the side. And then eventually we get to this long edge here. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more vertices to connect here. So I'm going to do 9 loop cuts and just connect them all manually using my 3D cursor. You can probably also just bridge edge loops and slide them to the end. But then once we got this bottom part filled up, we're going to do the same shit up at the top. And then I want to make you sit through that because I think you guys understand how that's done. So let's just skip to the part where I start making the strap. And then to make the strap itself, I first take the outline of this hole that I just cut. I separate that to a new object. I manually fill it in so I have some sort of a surface here. And then I gradually make that flat on the sides so I can use those flat sides to make one of these little loops or holes or whatever you want to call it. And after I got one of those, I just select that hole. I duplicate it, I place it on top of the other hole in the reference image. I connect everything together. And then I just do that a million times again until I have the entire watch strap completed. Alright guys, so I think we got more or less everything covered. If you guys feel that I missed something important, or if you want me to explain something in a different tutorial, then let me know down in the comments and I can make another video about that. You can also ask me a question on Discord, and I do Q&As on Instagram from time to time, so if you want to shoot me a question, if you want to send me a video request, let me know. Don't forget to check out the Blender Masterclass course if you want to sharpen your skills a little bit and learn to do the shit that I do here. But like the video, subscribe to the channel, let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see you guys in the next one.